Mafia boss marries a poor beggar as a bet, convinced he can transform her into the perfect criminal wife in 6 months. What his enemies don't know is that she's no ordinary street beggar. On their wedding night, as he expects to find a terrified bride, she reveals she knows about his organization's darkest secrets and about her missing journalist sister who was investigating his empire. When enemies attack and bullets start flying, he takes one to protect her, never expecting to find himself bleeding in the hands of a woman with military-grade combat skills and medical training. As rival families and corrupt FBI agents close in around them, their forced marriage becomes a deadly alliance that neither of them saw coming. But the biggest shock isn't her hidden identity or her lethal abilities, it's the way their hearts betray them both. Is this unexpected connection their greatest weakness in a world where attachment means death? Or will this bet-turned-marriage become the one thing powerful enough to transform them both? The private room of Club Inferno hummed with the quiet menace of power. Dominic Russo sat back in his leather chair, crystal tumbler of scotch untouched before him, as he watched the other mafia bosses through hooded eyes. The monthly gathering always felt like this, a dance of sharks circling for weakness. Servers moved silently around the table, replacing empty glasses and fresh cigars with practiced efficiency. None dared meet Dominic's gaze directly. They'd heard the stories, what happened to people who crossed the youngest but most feared boss in Chicago's underworld. Another successful month, gentlemen. Victor Calabresi's voice carried that artificial warmth that set Dominic's teeth on edge. Though I heard there was some trouble with the dock workers' union, Dominic's expression remained impassive. Nothing worth discussing. His voice was soft, but it carried weight that made two younger bosses shift uncomfortably in their seats. The night wore on, scotch replaced by bourbon, then whiskey. Victor continued his subtle needling, each comment designed to probe for weakness. Dominic responded with calculated indifference, though the alcohol was making it harder to maintain his usual iron control. "My Isabella," Victor was saying, swirling his drink. "She hosted the governor's wife for tea yesterday. Impeccable taste, perfect manners. That's what a proper mafia wife brings to the family." Something in Dominic snapped. "Any woman can learn to pour tea and make small talk." Victor's eyes gleamed. "Is that so? And yet here you are, still unmarried. No one to maintain your social obligations." "I could take any woman," Dominic said flatly. "And in 6 months, she'd be better than your precious Isabella." The room went silent. Victor leaned forward. "Care to make it interesting? Name your stakes." "The Riverside property against your new casino territory." Victor's smile was razor sharp. "But we choose the woman." Dominic knew he should stop. The alcohol made everything slightly blurred, but his pride was fully intact. Done. They sealed it with a handshake that felt like a threat. Hours later, emerging into the cold Chicago night, Victor suddenly stopped. His malicious grin sent warning signals through Dominic's whiskey-soaked brain. "There." Victor pointed to a hunched figure in the alley. "Her. The beggar. Make her your wife." Through the dim light, Dominic saw a woman in threadbare clothes, huddled against the wall. But something in her posture caught his attention that spoke of strength rather than defeat. She raised her head, and despite her circumstances, her eyes held a fierce dignity that made him pause. Dominic gestured to his men without taking his eyes off her. "Bring her." The morning sun pierced through floor-to-ceiling windows, startling Alara awake. Her head snapped up, military instincts kicking in as she assessed her surroundings. Gone was the familiar discomfort of concrete alleys, replaced by silk sheets and modern luxury. She slid silently from the king-sized bed, bare feet testing the plush carpet. First priority, exits. The bedroom door was locked from the outside, but the ventilation system looked promising. 2 windows offered views of Chicago's skyline, 30 floors up, no fire escape. The ensuite bathroom had a heavy marble soap dish that could double as a weapon. Alara's reflection in the bathroom mirror showed a face scrubbed clean of the dirt she'd carefully applied each day for months. Her dark hair hung loose instead of hidden under the ratty beanie that had been part of her homeless disguise. "Focus," she whispered, gripping the marble counter. 3 months ago, her sister Sophia had called in a panic. "I found something big, Alara. Connect the money trails between Reynolds and the Russos." Then silence. No body, no ransom demands, just Sophia's abandoned apartment and encrypted laptop. The memory of their last conversation fueled Alara as she'd traded her military intelligence career for life on Chicago's streets. Every night spent tracking Russo's operations. Every scrap of information carefully relayed to Maya through burner phones it had to lead somewhere. A key turned in the lock. Alara positioned herself against the wall, bathroom soap dish gripped behind her back. Dominic Russo entered, his presence filling the room despite his relaxed stance. "I have a business proposition," he said, voice smooth as aged whiskey. Her heart raced had he discovered her true identity, but his words revealed something more bizarre. A bet, a 6-month contract, financial security in exchange for playing trophy wife. No. Her response was immediate. His bodyguard stepped forward menacingly. Alara moved without hesitation. The soap dish clattered, forgotten as she executed a perfect arm lock, dropping the larger man to his knees. Dominic's eyebrows rose slightly, the only indication of surprise on his impassive face. "Consider the offer," he said, turning to leave. "You have until tomorrow." Hours later, Alara discovered a phone tucked behind a loose panel. She dialed Maya's number from memory. "I'm okay," she whispered, "but something's happened." A tiny red light blinked in the corner, and Alara's blood ran cold. Security cameras. Her mind raced through possibilities before settling on a realization. This wasn't a setback. This was an opportunity. Getting close to Dominic Russo might be her only chance to find Sophia. The morning sun cast long shadows across Dominic's mahogany desk as he reviewed the surveillance footage. Antonio Vega stood beside him, perfectly pressed suit matching his carefully controlled expression. On screen, Alara's whispered conversation with Maya played out. Dominic paused the footage on her face, determination evident even in the grainy image. "She's more than a homeless woman," Dominic said, sliding a military intelligence file across his desk. "Former Captain Alara Kane, expert in covert operations, hand-to-hand combat specialist." Antonio's manicured fingers traced the file's edge. "And her sister?" "Sophia Kane, investigative journalist who disappeared 3 months ago while looking into our organization." Dominic's voice remained neutral, but his eyes hardened. "Someone inside our family helped her vanish." "The sisters are a liability," Antonio said smoothly. "I can arrange a permanent solution." "No." Dominic's single word cut through the air. "This bet could work to our advantage. Marriage will give me legitimate reason to keep her close, use her skills. Through her, we'll flush out whoever helped her sister disappear." Meanwhile, upstairs, Alara methodically explored her gilded cage. She noted security camera positions, guard rotations, the thickness of walls. Her military training transformed every luxury item into potential tools or weapons. When Dominic returned that evening, his presence filled the penthouse like gathering storm, clouds. He carried a thick manila folder. "Your military record is impressive," he said, spreading photos across the coffee table. "Distinguished service, multiple commendations." Alara's breath caught at the next image, Sophia at her newspaper desk, focused on her laptop. More photos followed. Alara sleeping rough in various locations near Russo properties, meeting Maya, making calls from burner phones. "I'm accelerating the timeline," Dominic stated. "We marry within the week. In exchange, I'll dedicate my resources to finding your sister." His voice dropped lower. "Refuse, and Sophia's case stays cold forever." Night pressed against the penthouse windows as Alara stood before them, city lights blurring through her tears of frustration. The glass reflected her inner turmoil, duty, desperation, the maddening awareness that her careful plans had led her straight into Dominic's trap. Behind her, Dominic watched her reflection, triumph mingling with something unexpected in his dark eyes. Her military bearing, even in defeat, stirred his interest beyond mere strategy. Her shoulders straightened, steel replacing despair. She had no choice. For Sophia, she would marry the devil himself. The tailor's measuring tape whispered against silk as Alara stood on a pedestal, surrounded by mirrors in Dominic's penthouse. Valentina Russo circled like a hawk, her Louboutin clicking on marble. "Stand straighter," Valentina snapped. "You look like you're still sleeping in alleys." Alara lifted her chin, meeting Valentina's reflection. "Better than looking like I've got a steel rod for a spine." A muscle twitched in Valentina's jaw. "My brother's reputation is at stake. The Calabrese family is already spreading rumors about this arrangement." The tailor pinned another section of the ivory dress, careful to avoid Alara's skin. Through the windows, Chicago's skyline gleamed under morning Sunday. "Your brother seems capable of handling his own reputation," Alara said, noting how. Valentina's eyes softened at the mention of Dominic. "He's handled everything since we were teenagers," Valentina said, adjusting a crystal-studded strap. "After our father..." She stopped abruptly. The afternoon blurred into lessons on wine selection, table settings, and proper forms of address for various crime family members. Alara absorbed everything, building a mental map of relationships and hierarchies. The Bianchis always sit left of the head table, Valentina instructed during their etiquette lesson. Marco practically raised Dominic after, again, that sharp cutoff. During a break between hairstyling and makeup trials, Ilara finally confronted Valentina. "I may not be your choice for Dominic, but I'm not your enemy." Valentina studied her for a long moment. "We'll see. Tonight's dinner will be your first test." The pre-wedding dinner filled Dominic's private dining room with Chicago's most dangerous men. Marco Bianchi, gray-haired and dignified, offered Ilara a genuine smile that reached his eyes. Ilara noted how the capos deferred to Marco, how they watched Dominic for cues. She caught fragments of conversation about territory disputes, whispers about her sister's newspaper articles. After dessert, Dominic led her through candlelit corridors to her room. His hand rested lightly on her lower back, warm through the silk of her dress. "Is this all just for the bet?" she asked at her door, turning to face him. Dominic's knuckles brushed her cheek, surprisingly gentle. "Tomorrow, you become a Russo, whether you're ready or not." The words carried equal parts warning and promise. Ilara stood awake long after he left, watching city lights dance across her ceiling, wondering if she was more afraid of failing her mission or succeeding at becoming a true Russo wife. Ilara stared at her reflection, barely recognizing the woman in the mirror. The ivory designer gown hugged her curves, transforming the former soldier into an elegant bride, crystal beading, caught the morning light, scattering diamonds across the walls of the bridal suite. Valentina stepped behind her, adjusting the cathedral veil with unexpected tenderness. "Something's missing." She fastened a delicate diamond bracelet around Ilara's wrist. It was our mother's. The gesture surprised Ilara, but before she could respond, the wedding coordinator announced it was time. Walking down the aisle alone, Ilara catalogued faces in the crowd. Victor Calabrese sat with his associates, their smirks poorly concealed behind champagne glasses. Chicago's criminal elite filled the rose garden, the sweet floral scent a stark contrast to the dangerous men it surrounded. Dominic waited at the altar, his dark eyes intense as they tracked her approach. His custom tuxedo emphasized his powerful build, a reminder of the predator beneath the polished exterior. Their vows carried double meanings that made Ilara's spine tingle. When Dominic promised to protect and cherish, his grip on her hands tightened meaningfully. Her own vow to honor and obey came with a defiant lift of her chin that made his lips twitch. The reception sprawled through Dominic's estate. He guided her through introductions to the 5 key allies whose approval would seal the bet's success. The aging Don Giuseppe blessed their union with gnarled hands. Judge Crawford offered congratulations while discussing business opportunities. Union leader Mike O'Malley boasted about his influence over dock workers. The shipping magnate, Chen Wei, assessed her with calculating eyes. The mayor's brother, Robert King, kissed her cheek while whispering warnings about loyalty. During toasts, Victor raised his glass with a predatory smile. "To the remarkable transformation of our lovely bride." Some might say it's impossible to change one's true nature, but Dominic always enjoys a challenge. The threat in his words was clear. Dominic's hand remained possessive at her back as they navigated the crowd. He steered conversations, watching how she handled each interaction with Chicago's most dangerous men. The weight of their judgment pressed against her like a physical force. As evening descended and music filled the garden, Dominic led her away from the dancing guests. His office door clicked shut behind them, muffling the reception sounds. "Our car leaves in 30 minutes, he stated, outlining her new role and their immediate departure for his main residence. "Your training begins tonight." Through the window, Ilara watched security teams loading luggage into an armored vehicle. The reality of her situation settled over her like her heavy veil. She was truly a Russo bride now, for better or worse. The moonlit drive along Lake Michigan ended at iron gates that parted silently for their convoy. Ilara's exhausted mind cataloged security features as they wound up the tree-lined drive: motion sensors, cameras disguised as landscaping lights, armed patrols with dogs. The mansion loomed ahead, a massive stone structure that screamed old money and new security. Inside, their footsteps echoed across marble floors as Dominic led her through the grand entrance hall. "Pay attention," he commanded, explaining the security protocols, restricted access codes, mandatory check-ins, areas she wasn't permitted to enter alone. Staff members emerged from various doorways, their curious gazes following her. The head housekeeper, Mrs. Chen, a stern-faced woman in her 60s, gave a slight bow. "Welcome home, Mr. and Mrs. Russo." The words made Ilara's skin prickle. Dominic's tour revealed a fortress disguised as a luxury home. Every window was bulletproof, every door reinforced. The kitchen staff required security clearance. Guards monitored a high-tech security room 24/7. The master suite occupied the entire east wing. Dominic showed her to her bedroom, connected to his by a shared sitting room. "We'll maintain appearances in public," he stated flatly. "But private intimacy isn't part of our arrangement." The small kindness surprised her, though she kept her face neutral. Alone at last, Alara swept her room for bugs and cameras, finding 3. She left them in place. Disabling them would only raise suspicion. The wedding dress lay discarded on a chaise lounge, a glittering reminder of her new prison. Sleep proved impossible. Around midnight, she slipped into the dark hallway. The house was silent except for distant footsteps of patrolling guards. Dominic's office door yielded to her lockpicking skills, learned during military intelligence training. The wall safe behind an abstract painting took longer, but eventually clicked open. Inside, her hands trembled as she found photos. Her sister Sophia meeting Antonio in various locations. Partial transcripts detailed their discussions of financial irregularities, missing shipments, corrupted officials within Dominic's organization. Using a miniature camera disguised as a pendant, Alara photographed everything quickly, heart pounding. The door's soft creak froze her in place. Dominic filled the doorway, his unbuttoned shirt revealing his muscled chest. His expression shifted from surprise to dangerous anger as he observed the open safe, the documents in her hands. He stepped inside, closing the door with deliberate slowness. "Finding anything interesting, wife?" His quiet voice carried more menace than a shout. Alara squared her shoulders, clutching the documents. "When were you planning to tell me about these meetings?" Dominic's jaw clenched as he stalked toward her, but she didn't back away. "You had no right to break into my safe. And you had no right to hide information about my sister," she shot back. "What was Antonio doing meeting with her?" His fingers flexed at his sides, betraying his frustration. "Antonio was my informant, feeding her controlled information about our rivals, not about us." "You expect me to believe that?" "I don't expect anything from you except the courtesy of not breaking into my office on our wedding night." His voice carried an edge of dark humor despite his anger. Alara slapped the photos on his desk. 3 months ago, she vanishes after meeting him. That's not a coincidence. "You think I don't know that?" Dominic ran a hand through his hair. "I've been investigating her disappearance. The Navarro family had been watching her too. They don't share my policy about journalists." "Policy?" She laughed bitterly. "What, you have a code about who you murder?" His eyes flashed. "Yes, actually. I eliminate threats to my family and business. I don't target civilians or journalists who are just doing their jobs." "How noble of you," she spat, but something in his steady gaze made her hesitate. "Your sister was investigating corruption that went beyond my organization. City officials, judges, rival families. I had Antonio feed her specific information to direct her attention away from sensitive areas. To protect yourself? To protect her." His response surprised them both. The deeper she dug, the more dangerous it became. Then she disappeared before Antonio could warn her about. The security alarm's sudden wail cut him off. Heavy footsteps pounded down the hall before the door burst open. Marco, Dominic's security chief, appeared with his weapon drawn. "Sir, perimeter breach on the east side." The window exploded inward. Without hesitation, Dominic lunged forward, spinning Alara away from the spray of glass. A sharp crack split the air. Dominic grunted, his body jerking as he shielded her. Return fire erupted from security teams outside. Through the chaos, Alara noticed dark blood spreading across Dominic's shoulder. "You're hit," she said, combat training kicking in as she pressed her hand against the wound. "Master bathroom," he gritted out, letting her help him toward the adjacent door. Medical kit under the sink. They stumbled inside together, his blood warm on her hands. Her mind raced. He'd taken that bullet for her without a second thought. The man who'd forced her into marriage had just risked his life to save hers. "Why?" she demanded, grabbing the medical kit. He met her eyes, pain and something else darkening his gaze. "You're my wife now. That means something to me, even if it doesn't to you." The bathroom gleamed with marble and chrome, now marred by bloody gauze and an open medical kit. Alara's steady hands worked the curved needle through Dominic's flesh, her military training evident in each precise stitch. He sat shirtless on the edge of the massive tub, occasionally lifting a crystal bottle of whiskey to his lips. "You're good at this," he said, voice rougher than usual. Field medicine was part of training. She tied off another stitch. "You should really see a doctor." "No doctors." He took another long pull from the bottle. Too many questions. The wound wasn't life-threatening. The bullet had gone clean through his shoulder. Still, he'd lost enough blood to make him uncharacteristically talkative, especially combined with the whiskey. 16, he said suddenly, making her pause. I was 16 when my father put a gun in my hand and told me to run the family. Alara remained silent, sensing something significant in his disclosure. My mother. He stared at nothing, jaw working. She tried to take us away, me and my sister. He caught her packing bags. His knuckles whitened around the bottle. Made me watch what happens to people who betray the family. The implications turned Alara's stomach, but she kept her hand steady, starting another stitch. So I learned to be better than him, stronger, smarter. His laugh held no humor. Turns out I had a talent for it, the business, the violence, everything I never wanted to be good at. Alara absorbed this glimpse behind his armor but offered nothing in return. Her fingers brushed his skin as she placed the final stitch, and she felt him tense at the contact. His phone buzzed, shattering the moment. Report, he barked, cold efficiency replacing vulnerability instantly. She cleaned up while he took the call, his voice growing harder with each word. Navarro, left their mark, find them. Dawn painted the sky when they finally headed toward their separate bedrooms. Another buzz stopped them. Dominic answered the video call, his expression darkening. The image showed Maya unconscious, tied to a chair in a concrete room. Alara's heart stopped. Hello, Russo. Diego Navarro's voice dripped satisfaction. Beautiful wife you've acquired. I have something you might want. The journalist who's been causing trouble. Trade her for your bride in 48 hours, or she dies. And we both know how you hate losing things that belong to you. The call ended. Alara sank onto Dominic's bed, trembling. That's not Sophia. It's Maya, my friend. She's innocent in all this. Dominic sat beside her, his large hand covering hers. Then we'll just have to educate him, won't we? His voice held lethal promise. No one takes what's mine. The possessiveness in his tone sent a shiver through her, whether from fear or something else, she wasn't sure. The morning sun streamed through bulletproof windows as Dominic's inner circle filed into the estate's conference room. Alara noticed their subtle reactions, raised eyebrows, exchanged glances, as she took her seat beside Dominic at the head of the massive mahogany table. Gentlemen, Dominic's voice cut through the murmurs. My wife joins us today not just as Mrs. Russo, but as a valuable intelligence asset. Marco Bianchi, Dominic's underboss, leaned forward. With respect, boss, this is unprecedented. As is our current situation, Dominic laid out photos of Maya's capture. The Navarros believe they have Sophia Kane. We need to extract their hostage, without revealing their mistake. Antonio shifted in his chair, his manicured fingers drumming against his phone. Perhaps Mrs. Russo should leave the tactical discussion to those with more experience. My wife has military intelligence training, Dominic countered smoothly. Her insight will be crucial. Alara studied the surveillance photos, ignoring Antonio's thinly veiled hostility. Diego's overconfident. He's not expecting a trained operative. He thinks he's dealing with a journalist. Antonio's phone buzzed again. He checked it quickly, his face carefully neutral. We should eliminate the threat directly. The Navarros respond to force. No. Dominic's tone brooked no argument. We maintain the advantage of Sophia Kane's unknown status. However, we have another immediate concern. The lake house gathering starts tonight. Alara's head snapped up. A week-long delay could be fatal for Maya. All major families will attend, Dominic continued. Our absence would raise suspicions. We'll use the gathering as cover while our people locate Maya. The meeting continued with tactical details, but Alara barely heard them, her mind racing with possibilities and fears. After dismissing his men, Dominic turned to her. We need to discuss parameters, he said quietly. The families will be watching closely. Our marriage must appear genuine. You mean convincing them we're falling in love? The words tasted bitter. Yes, I won't touch you without consent, but we need to sell this. In their bedroom, Alara found an extensive wardrobe waiting, designer pieces in exactly her size. She ran her fingers over silk blouses and tailored pants, evidence of how thoroughly Dominic had investigated her before their chance meeting. As their security detail loaded luggage into the armored SUV, Antonio pulled Dominic aside near the garage. Alara watched through the tinted window as the consigliere spoke urgently, his gestures sharp with barely contained agitation. Dominic's posture remained rigid, his responses clipped. The exchange confirmed her growing suspicion. Antonio knew something about Sophia. The question was whether Dominic suspected it too. The lake house loomed ahead, a week of performance and pretense awaiting them. But somewhere, Maya was running out of time. The sun dipped behind Lake Michigan as Dominic's convoy pulled up to the modernist mansion. Floor-to-ceiling windows reflected the orange sky, and the sleek architecture contrasted sharply with the heavily armed guards positioned discreetly around the property. On the sprawling terrace, cocktail glasses clinked as Chicago's most dangerous families turned to watch their arrival. "Showtime," Dominic murmured, his hand settling possessively on Alara's lower back as they stepped out of the SUV. Victor Calabrese raised his whiskey in mock salute, while the Navarro contingent, notably missing Diego, assessed them with predatory interest. The Romeros maintained careful neutrality, though their subtle glances betrayed their curiosity about Dominic's mysterious new bride. "Remember," Dominic whispered against her ear, making it appear intimate rather than instructional, "you're madly in love with me." "Try not to make me regret it," Alara whispered back through a practiced smile. Throughout cocktail hour, Dominic kept her close, his arm around her waist as he guided her through introductions. His thumb traced small circles on her hip, a warning when she needed to be careful, a signal when someone important approached. Every touch was calculated, yet Alara couldn't help noticing the warmth of his hand through her silk dress. The wives circled her like elegant sharks, probing for weakness. Alara delivered her cover story with perfect composure. Former military medic, met Dominic while volunteering at his veterans' charity, a whirlwind romance. The military background explained both her obvious training and her previous poverty, while the charity angle softened Dominic's ruthless image. "How charitable of Dominic," Victor's wife purred, her smile not reaching her eyes. During dinner, conversations carried double meanings. Victor referenced transformation stories, each example a subtle dig at the bet. The Navarros asked pointed questions about Dominic's influence with the police commissioner and federal judges. "My husband's connections are his business," Alara deflected smoothly. "I focus on supporting his charitable work." Dominic squeezed her knee under the table, approval. After dinner, the men withdrew to discuss territory and profit margins. Alara braced herself for isolation, but Valentina surprisingly appeared at her side. "Come, sister," Valentina announced loudly. "Let me introduce you to everyone properly." In the ladies' sitting room, Valentina orchestrated conversations that maintained Alara's cover while subtly establishing her status as a protected Russo. Later, cornering Alara in a quiet moment, Valentina's mask slipped. "I don't trust you," she hissed. "But you're wearing our name now. I'll help you appear worthy of it." Close to midnight, Dominic and Alara finally retreated to their suite. They did a silent sweep for surveillance devices before comparing notes in the bathroom with the shower running. "Diego's absence is suspicious," Dominic muttered. "He's never missed a gathering." "The Navarros asked a lot about your judicial contacts," Alara added. "More than usual?" "Much more. Something's coming." They addressed the sleeping arrangement awkwardly. The suite had one king bed, and appearances had to be maintained. They constructed a pillow barrier down the center, both painfully aware of each other's presence. Just as Dominic reached for the lights, his phone chimed. The photo showed Maya, conscious now, zip-tied to a chair. The message below read, "Proof of life. Now show us. Your new bride is truly under control." Dominic scanned the dark windows. "They're watching. Even here." Alara's military training kicked in as she cataloged vantage points, angles, possible surveillance positions among the trees. Their room faced the lake, exposed, despite being 3 stories up. The pillow barrier suddenly seemed very flimsy protection, not from each other, but from the dangers pressing in from all sides. Dawn crept through the lake house windows as Alara slowly surfaced from sleep, instantly aware of unfamiliar warmth surrounding her. Her eyes snapped open to find herself nestled against Dominic's chest, his arm draped possessively around her waist. The carefully constructed pillow barrier lay scattered across the floor, evidence of their unconscious gravitating toward each other during the night. Her military training screamed at her to assess and extract, but her body betrayed her with a moment of reluctance. His sleeping face looked younger. The hard lines of authority softened. She carefully slid from his embrace, relieved when he didn't stir. Before the other families emerged for breakfast, Dominic pulled her into his study. "Our contact inside the Navarro compound sent coordinates," he murmured, showing her an encrypted message on his phone. "Maya's not at the estate. They're holding her in a warehouse by the docks." "That's unexpected," Alara frowned. "Why would Diego keep her separate from his base of operations?" "Because he doesn't want his father knowing," Dominic replied. "This operation is unsanctioned." The morning progressed to a flotilla of luxury boats launching onto Lake Michigan's pristine waters. Dominic guided Alara onto his sleek speedboat, using the excuse of teaching her to drive to maintain constant contact. His chest pressed against her back as he demonstrated the controls, his breath warm against her ear as he mixed legitimate instruction with updates about Maya. "Gentle with the throttle," he murmured, hands covering hers. "Our team confirmed she's being held on the 3rd floor. Guards change at midnight." His lips brushed her neck, making her shiver despite knowing it was for show. But was it entirely pretense? The solid warmth of him behind her, the strength in his hands, over hers, sent her pulse racing in a way that had nothing to do with their cover. From the slight hitch in his breathing when she leaned back against him, she suspected the attraction wasn't entirely one-sided. They anchored at a private island for lunch, joining the other families on a pristine beach. While picking at elegant seafood, Alara noticed a glint of metal from a distant boat. Not the casual photography of paparazzi hunting celebrity mafia shots, but the deliberate documentation of a surveillance operation. The afternoon's entertainment was skeet shooting, giving Alara no choice but to demonstrate her military-honed skills. The clay pigeons shattered in rapid succession as she executed perfect shots. The other wives applauded while their husbands evaluated her with new interest. Antonio watched with narrowed eyes, phone in hand. Back at the lake house, Alara entered their suite first and spotted the manila envelope on the floor. Inside were surveillance photos of Sofia meeting with Antonio, but more disturbing were images of her sister with a sharp-featured man in a federal agent's suit. A handwritten note accompanied the photos. "Ask your husband who really took your sister." When Dominic returned from a business meeting, he found Alara throwing clothes into her suitcase. She thrust the photos at him. "You manipulated me from the start. What happened to my sister?" "Alara, was this all just an elaborate game? Using me to flush out whoever took her, knowing she's already dead?" "Stop." He grabbed her arms, halting her frantic packing. The raw emotion in his expression caught her off guard. "I swear to you, I believe your sister is alive, and I think I know who's hunting you both." The moonlight cast long shadows across their suite sitting room, as Dominic and Alara hunched over the coffee table, surveillance photos scattered between them like pieces of a deadly puzzle. Alara's fingers trembled slightly as she traced her sister's image in one photo, showing Sofia deep in conversation with a sharp-featured man in an expensive suit. "Agent Carter Reynolds," Dominic said, his voice tight with controlled anger. "He's been a thorn in Chicago's side for years, but not for the reasons you'd expect from an FBI agent." "What do you mean?" Alara looked up, catching the darkness in his expression. "He plays all sides, takes payoffs from some families to build cases against others, uses the badge to extort protection money while pretending to fight corruption." Dominic reached for his whiskey, taking a measured sip. "Your sister was investigating the Russo family, yes, but I suspect Reynolds was using her to gather intel on everyone. She had access, credibility as a journalist. Perfect cover." Alara's military training kicked in, helping her process the information strategically rather than emotionally, until she discovered he was corrupt. "Exactly." Dominic leaned forward, his sleeve brushing hers. "My sources indicate she was compiling evidence against Reynolds himself when she disappeared. He probably thought eliminating her would bury the truth. But now he's after me, assuming I have whatever evidence she collected." The pieces clicked into place in Alara's mind. "That's why you really married me. Not just for the bet. You're using me as bait." Instead of denying it, Dominic held her gaze. "Initially, yes, but now we're both targets. Reynolds was seen meeting with Diego Navarro last week. Maya's kidnapping, the surveillance, the warning note, it's all connected." They spent hours connecting threads, their shoulders touching as they pored over intelligence reports and surveillance data. Alara found herself impressed by Dominic's tactical mind, the way he processed information with the same military precision she'd been trained in. He, in turn, respected her analytical insights, never dismissing her theories. "We need to identify who in my organization is feeding Reynolds information," Dominic said, around 3 a.m., rubbing his tired eyes. "Antonio's behavior has been suspicious, but he's not the only possibility. And we need to find Maya and Sofia before Reynolds realizes we're onto him." Alara suppressed a yawn. "The Navarro warehouse is our best lead." Their mutual exhaustion finally drove them to bed as dawn approached. Neither mentioned the scattered pillows from the previous night, and when Alara cautiously settled beside him, Dominic's arm curved protectively around her waist. The gesture felt less like maintaining their cover and more like a silent acknowledgement of their new alliance. They managed barely 3 hours of sleep before Dominic's phone chimed. He read the message with a frown, then showed Alara coordinates for a yacht party that afternoon, hosted by the Calabreses. Victor's note made her skin crawl. Bring your lovely bride. A perfect opportunity to display her transformation. Alara watched Dominic dress for the party, noting the extra weapons he concealed within his tailored jacket. When he approached her with a diamond bracelet, she felt him slip something small into the clasp. Tracker? He murmured, his fingers lingering on her wrist. Just in case. The gesture struck her. This wasn't about protecting his investment anymore. Something had shifted during their night of strategizing, creating a tentative trust neither had expected. The late afternoon sun glinted off the polished deck of Victor Calabrese's yacht, a floating monument to excess that cut through Lake Michigan's waters. Alara stood among a cluster of Mafia wives, maintaining her practiced smile as she recounted a fictional tale of how Dominic had pursued her. He wouldn't take no for an answer, she said, drawing knowing laughs from the women. Kept showing up at the veterans clinic where I volunteered until I agreed to coffee. While she spoke, her trained eyes continuously scanned the deck. Dominic worked the crowd near the bar, shaking hands with a corrupt judge, whose decisions always seemed to favor certain families. 2 police captains who were clearly on someone's payroll lounged nearby, while a city council member famous for pushing through suspicious zoning changes chatted with Victor. The unfamiliar latecomer caught her attention again. Tall, well-dressed, with sharp features that seemed vaguely familiar, he kept watching her while pretending not to. His arrival hadn't followed the usual security protocols she'd observed other guests going through. When she stepped away to refresh her drink, he materialized beside her. James Miller, he introduced himself smoothly. I do business with Victor from time to time. Charmed, Alara replied, noting how he positioned himself to block her direct path back to the group. Quite a change from your previous life, he commented, his tone casual but his eyes intense. Though I imagine old habits die hard. Alara maintained her smile while her pulse quickened. I'm not sure what you mean. Oh, I think you do. I have mutual friends who miss you. One in particular misses your regular coffee meetings. The reference to Maya sent ice through her veins. She laughed lightly, playing for time while pressing the emergency signal in her bracelet. You'll have to refresh my memory. Before she could maneuver away, Victor's voice boomed across the deck. Ladies and gentlemen, the real party is about to begin. We're heading to international waters for some serious poker. Tonight, anything can be wagered, anything at all. Alara noticed sleek speedboats approaching from different directions. The men who boarded carried themselves with military precision, their jackets bulging suspiciously. These weren't the usual security teams she'd been cataloging all afternoon. James cornered her in a narrow corridor as she tried to return to the main deck. In the confined space, his demeanor changed completely. He pulled out an FBI badge. Agent Carter Reynolds, I can get you away from Dominic. Russo right now. Just tell me where your sister stored her evidence. The pieces clicked into place. The voice from Maya's video, the surveillance photos, everything. Before she could respond, shouting erupted above them. Reynolds melted away as Alara rushed topside. She emerged to find Dominic facing off against several armed men, his expression coldly furious. Victor stood at the helm, looking pleased with himself. Since we're all here, Victor announced, I thought we should resolve some family business. Diego Navarro will be joining us shortly to discuss recent misunderstandings. The distant thrum of helicopter blades emphasized his words. Dominic's hand found Alara's waist, pulling her close. His lips brushed her ear. When I move, stay behind me and head for the stern. Trust me. She felt the deadly tension in his body, understanding why Chicago's most powerful criminals spoke his name in whispers. The helicopter grew louder, and Alara watched the sun setting blood-red over the lake, staining the water the color of violence to come. The helicopter's blades churned the air as Diego Navarro stepped onto the yacht's deck, flanked by armed men. In that same moment, Victor's security team drew weapons with practiced synchronization, their true allegiance becoming crystal clear. The afternoon sun caught the metal of countless guns now aimed at Dominic. Dominic moved with devastating speed. His elbow crushed the windpipe of the nearest guard, while his other hand sent a second man sprawling with a precise strike to the temple. He yanked Alara behind the mahogany bar as bullets splintered the wood around them. Screams erupted as the civilian guests scrambled for cover. Crystal glasses shattered. Women in designer dresses dove behind loungers. The corrupt judge crawled under a table, his authority meaningless in the chaos. Stay low, Dominic commanded, his voice deadly calm. He emerged from cover with lethal grace, each movement calculated. 2 shots, 2. Bodies dropped. A third man rushed him with a knife. Dominic broke his arm and used him as a shield against incoming fire. Alara watched in fascination rather than horror. His violence was precise, almost beautiful in its efficiency. This was why hardened criminals feared him. Not for random brutality, but for the cold perfection of his lethal skill. Enough! Diego's voice cut through the gunfire. He held Victor's wife, Maria, with a gun to her head. Give me Elora, and we'll trade your new bride for Victor's old one. Plus, you'll get that troublesome friend of hers back. Dominic's response was a single shot that punched through Diego's shoulder, causing him to release Maria with a howl of pain. She scrambled away as Dominic advanced. You actually thought this would work? Dominic's voice carried across the deck. Using the bed as cover while Antonio positioned himself to take my territory. Amateur. The FBI's been building a case against you for months. Victor spat, clutching his bleeding arm where Dominic's bullet had grazed him. Reynolds promised us immunity. Speaking of the devil, Reynolds chose that moment to grab Alara from behind. Federal agent, I'm extracting the civilian. Alara drove her elbow into his solar plexus, twisting in his grip to slam her knee into his groin. Her military training took over as she broke his hold and swept his legs out from under him. Dominic reached them in 3 long strides, his gun pressed to Reynolds' temple. Maya's location. Now. Warehouse 6 at Navy Pier. Reynolds gasped. South End. The truth, finally. Dominic pulled the trigger without hesitation. The distant roar of engines announced the arrival of Dominic's reinforcements. Speedboats approached from multiple directions, filled with armed men loyal to the Russo family. Dominic dragged Diego to his knees in front of the assembled survivors. The example he made of the Navarro heir would ensure no one forgot the price of betrayal. Victor and the others watched, pale-faced, as Dominic demonstrated why crossing him was a fatal mistake. Later, cutting through the darkening water in a speedboat back to the lake house, Alara watched Dominic's profile against the setting Sunday. His hands, so deadly hours before, now guided the wheel with gentle precision. Why didn't you let Reynolds take me? She asked. If you knew it would lead to Maya? Dominic turned to her, his expression fierce. Because he would have killed you both once he got what he wanted. The protective fury in his voice ignited something in her core. She moved without thinking, pulling his mouth to hers. The kiss exploded between them, hot and desperate. His hands tangled in her hair as her fingers gripped his shoulders. When they finally broke apart, they stared at each other, both stunned by the raw need that had erupted through their careful facades. The lights burned low in the lake house's secure room, as Dominic's team gathered around blueprints of Navy Pier's Warehouse 6. Alara sat at the table, methodically field-stripping a Glock with the practice movements of someone who'd done it countless times before. The familiar click of metal parts helped steady her still tingling lips. I'm going, she stated firmly, not looking up from her work. Maya's there because of me. Dominic's jaw tightened. It's too dangerous. My men can handle... The slide snapped back into place with decisive force. I have more combat experience than half your team. You've seen my file. Their eyes met across the table, electricity crackling between them. His fingers brushed her shoulder as he leaned over to examine the warehouse layout, lingering longer than necessary. The touch sent heat spreading across her skin. Antonio's gone dark, Marco reported, entering with a tablet. No contact since the yacht. His accounts were just emptied. The rat finally shows his true colors, Dominic growled. His hand curled into a fist on the table. They spent the next hour planning entry points and contingencies. Dominic and Alara moved around each other like magnets, maintaining professional distance while constantly aware of the other's presence. When she reached for the building schematics, he shifted closer than needed, his chest barely brushing her back. 2 teams, Dominic finally announced. Marco leads the frontal assault as a distraction. Alara and I take the service entrance. His gaze challenged anyone to object to her inclusion. The raid itself went smoothly until they found Maya. She lay unconscious on a cot, an IV drip keeping her sedated. While Dominic's men secured the perimeter, Alara discovered a laptop containing Reynolds' files, detailed records of blackmail and corruption, including evidence he'd threatened Antonio with exposure of hidden accounts. The first shot came as they were evacuating Maya. Alara spotted the gunman a split second before he fired, shoving her friend aside. White-hot pain blazed across her ribs as the bullet grazed her side. Dominic's reaction was instantaneous and lethal. The shooter died before his second round left the chamber. Then Dominic was there, scooping Alara into his arms despite her protests that she could walk. It's just a graze, she insisted as he laid her in the SUV's back seat. Shut up and let me look. His hands were surprisingly gentle as they lifted her shirt, cleaning and bandaging the wound with focused intensity. His fingers trembled slightly against her skin. During the drive back, Maya stirred, groggy but coherent. "They kept asking about Sophia's evidence," she mumbled. "Something big. Corruption. Politicians and criminals both." At the lake house, after ensuring Maya was settled with a doctor, Alara and Dominic barely made it through their suite door before crashing together. The kiss was nothing like their earlier one. This was raw need, months of tension exploding into desperate touches and torn clothing. She matched his intensity force for force, refusing to yield when he tried to take control. His surprise when she flipped their positions, pinning him beneath her, quickly transformed into heated appreciation. Power shifted between them like a dance, neither truly surrendering. Later, wrapped in tangled sheets, Alara traced the tattoo on his chest. "This doesn't mean I trust you yet." Dominic caught her wandering hand, pressing it over his heart. "But it means something." The vulnerability in his voice made her breath catch. They lay in weighted silence, both acutely aware of how completely everything had changed between them. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, golden sunlight spilled across Dominic's bare shoulders as he stood motionless, watching the lake shimmer with dawn's first rays. Alara kept her breathing steady, feigning sleep while studying the hard lines of his profile softened by morning light. Scars she hadn't noticed in the darkness mapped stories across his skin. Bullet wounds, knife marks, a history of violence written in silver threads. But it was his expression that held her attention. The mask of Chicago's most feared crime boss had slipped, revealing something raw and almost young in his features. For the first time, she could see traces of the 16-year-old boy who'd been forced into this life. "I know you're awake," he said softly, not turning from the window. At the breakfast table, Maya's hands trembled slightly around her coffee cup as she recounted details from her captivity. "The guards weren't careful about what they said around me. They mentioned someone called the Cleaner, said he was being brought in to handle a liability. Antonio," Dominic said grimly. "He knows too much about Reynolds' operation and whatever evidence Sophia gathered." As if summoned by the words, Marco appeared in the doorway. "Boss, Antonio's apartment was hit. Place is torn apart. Signs of struggle. Blood on the kitchen floor." Dominic's knuckles whitened around his coffee cup. "Get teams, searching every property he might access. Now." After Maya retreated to rest, Alara found Dominic in his study, shoulders tense as he pored over security reports. She closed the door behind her. "We need to talk about last night," she said quietly. He turned, expression guarded. "Which part? The raid? The wound? Or what happened after?" "All of it. But maybe start with why you really made that bet." Something flickered in his dark eyes. He was silent so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "My father killed my mother when I was 16. She tried to take Valentina and me away from this life. He caught her packing bags late one night. His voice was mechanical, distant. Shot her in our kitchen. Then he told me I'd be taking over daily operations. Said if I refused, Valentina would pay the price." Alara's chest tightened. "That's why you protect her so fiercely." "The other families have been pushing arranged marriages, strategic alliances. The bet was rebellion, choosing someone they'd hate." His laugh held no humor. "I never expected. To feel something real?" she finished softly. "Your turn," he said. "Why is finding Sophia worth risking everything?" "Our parents died when I was young. Sophia raised me, protected me, sacrificed everything to keep us together. She's the only real family I've ever had." Alara's throat felt tight. "Until now, maybe." The vulnerability in his eyes matched her own. He took a step toward her, then his phone buzzed. His expression shifted to alert focus as he answered. "Antonio's been spotted at Harrison Airfield. Private jet, fueled and waiting." He was already moving, grabbing his jacket. They were halfway to the door when his phone buzzed again. Dominic went still, staring at the screen. Wordlessly, he handed it to her. The photos were intimate, moments from last night they thought private. Them tangled in sheets, his hands gentle on her skin, her head thrown back in pleasure. The message below from Victor was simple, but devastating. "You've fallen for her. Bet lost." Alara looked up to find Dominic's face had transformed back into an unreadable mask. The warmth from their earlier conversation vanished, leaving her cold with doubt. Had his vulnerability been just another calculated move in a game she was only beginning to understand? The private jet's engines whined as it taxied toward the runway, early morning sun glinting off its polished hull. Dominic's Escalade screeched to a halt on the tarmac, his security vehicles boxing in the aircraft. Gone was any trace of the vulnerable man from earlier. His expression had hardened into lethal focus. "Block the runway," he ordered through his radio. Armed men swarmed the plane while others forced the pilots to cut the engines. Inside the cabin, they found Antonio frantically feeding documents into a portable shredder. Dominic kicked the device away, papers scattering across the floor. Antonio raised his hands, that smooth, professional mask finally cracking. "I can explain everything," he said, backing away. "Start with how long you've been Reynolds' rat." Dominic's voice was terrifyingly calm. 7 years. Antonio's eyes darted between them. "He approached me after a federal investigation got too close. We had an arrangement. I helped him build cases against rival families while protecting our interests. And my sister?" Alara stepped forward. "What happened to her?" "She was investigating Reynolds' corruption. When she got too close, he wanted her eliminated." Antonio straightened his tie, some composure returning. "I convinced him I had a better solution. An old FBI contact owed me a favor. He runs an unofficial witness protection program. Sophia's alive, safe under his protection." "Where?" Alara demanded. "That information is my insurance. Let me leave the country and I'll tell you exactly where to find her." "After you betrayed my family?" Dominic's hand moved to his weapon. "Your father betrayed the family. First," Antonio said quietly. "Did you never wonder who really ordered the hit on your mother? Who made it look like he did it himself?" Dominic's gun appeared so fast even Alara flinched. He pressed the barrel to Antonio's forehead, finger tightening on the trigger. "Wait!" Alara grabbed his arm. "He's our only lead to Sophia." Their eyes locked in silent battle. Finally, Dominic lowered the weapon. "Take him to the safe house on Wellington. Full security, no outside contact." Hours later at the lake house, Alara threw clothes into her suitcase while Dominic watched from the doorway. "You're being reckless," he said. "And you're being selfish. My sister could be alive, but you're too focused on revenge to care. Everything I've done was to protect your organization." She spun to face him. "This was never about helping me find Sophia. You used her disappearance to smoke out traitors in your ranks. Just like you used me to win that bet. That's not... I saw your face when Victor's message came. This was always just business." Her voice cracked. "I was stupid to think it could be anything else." Before Dominic could respond, Maya burst in, clutching a laptop. "I decoded fragments from Antonio's shredded documents. There's a meeting scheduled tomorrow. Someone called the cleaner is meeting a witness protection contact." Alara froze. That has to be about Sophia. The tension crackled between them as Dominic visibly wrestled with his priorities. Vengeance against Antonio versus his growing feelings for Alara. His jaw clenched as he watched her process this potential lead to her sister. "We need to move fast," Maya said, glancing uncertainly between them. "The meeting's at noon." The lake house was silent except for Alara's careful movements as she gathered surveillance equipment in the study. Her fingers traced over high-tech listening devices and miniature cameras, muscle memory from her military days guiding her selections. The sky outside remained, dark, dawn still an hour away. She froze at the sound of footsteps, then relaxed marginally as Dominic appeared in the doorway. He wore tactical black, weapons already strapped in place, looking every inch the dangerous man she'd first met. Without a word, he laid additional gear on the desk, a specialized sniper scope, thermal imaging equipment, and a set of encrypted radios. "We do this together," he said simply. "Your sister is my priority now." Alara studied his face, searching for any trace of manipulation. Finding none, she nodded curtly. "What changed?" "My team found something overnight." He spread surveillance photos across the desk. "The cleaner is Matteo Leone. He's done work for every major family in Chicago. But he's particular. He only takes contracts that come through certain channels. High-level, politically connected channels. Meaning someone powerful wanted Sophia eliminated." Alara concluded, examining Leone's photo. The man looked ordinary, unremarkable, the perfect disguise for a professional killer. And they're still trying. Dominic checked his weapons methodically. Leone doesn't fail. If he's involved now, they're cleaning up loose ends. They drove separately to the conservation area, maintaining radio contact as they established positions surrounding the meeting point. Alara settled into a blind overlooking the empty parking lot, adjusting her scope as first light crept through the trees. "Target approaching from the south," Dominic's voice crackled in her earpiece. "Civilian vehicle, single occupant." A weathered Honda pulled in, its driver matching Antonio's description of the retired FBI agent. mid-60s, silver hair, government posture. 20 minutes later, a black SUV arrived. Leonie emerged, moving with practiced casualness. Through her directional microphone, Alara caught their conversation. "She's been moved 3 times, the agent was saying. Security concerns, but the current location is solid, isolated, farmhouse, minimal traffic. Address?" Leonie's voice was surprisingly gentle. The agent passed him a slip of paper. "She has no idea she's still in danger. Thinks the protection is just protocol." "Target is moving," Alara reported as Leonie turned to leave. "Do we take them?" "Now." Dominic's team moved with surgical precision. Within minutes, both men were secured in separate vehicles. The questioning was intense but brief. Leonie was a professional who understood negotiation. "The hit's scheduled for tonight," he revealed. 2-man backup team in case I miss the window. You've got maybe 6 hours. They took Dominic's car, pushing speed limits on back roads toward the farmhouse 2 hours outside Chicago. Fields of corn and soybeans blurred past as Alara processed everything. "Why did you change your mind about Antonio?" she finally asked. "Why choose helping me over your revenge?" Dominic's hands tightened on the steering wheel. When he spoke, his voice carried raw honesty she'd never heard before. "Because somewhere between that ridiculous bet and last night, you became more important than my pride or my vengeance." The admission hung in the air between them, heavy with implications neither was ready to fully examine. Miles passed in silence as they raced against time, both aware that finding Sophia would irrevocably change whatever had begun between them. Trees thickened along the roadside as they entered more remote territory. Alara checked her weapons again, trying to focus on the mission rather than Dominic's words or the way her heart had stuttered at his confession. Sunset painted the isolated farmhouse in shades of amber and shadow, casting long fingers of darkness across the overgrown lawn. From their position in the dense tree line, Dominic and Alara observed the property with professional scrutiny. 2 armed men circled the perimeter with military precision, not typical witness protection protocol. "Former special forces," Alara whispered, noting their movement patterns. "The way they maintain sightlines, cover blind spots." Dominic nodded, his expression cold and focused. "They're expecting trouble. Question is whether they're protection or prison guards." Warm light glowed from the farmhouse windows, silhouettes moving within suggesting at least 2 occupants. Alara's heart raced. After months of searching, her sister was finally within reach. They formulated their plan using hand signals and hushed exchanges, each contributing their expertise. Alara's military training complemented Dominic's years of tactical experience in ways that surprised them both. When she insisted on non-lethal tactics, he agreed without argument, understanding her need to protect both her sister and her conscience. "Create chaos here." Dominic indicated the front of the property, while I circle behind. "They're professionals. They'll split up to investigate, making them vulnerable." Alara positioned herself near the gravel driveway, took aim, and sent a flashbang grenade arcing toward an empty section of the yard. The explosion of light and sound had immediate effect. Both guards moved to investigate, separating just as predicted. Dominic moved like a shadow, efficiently neutralizing the first guard with a precision chokehold. Alara engaged the second, using her combat training to subdue him without permanent injury. Their coordinated assault felt natural, as if they'd worked together for years instead of days. Inside the farmhouse, they found Sophia in a makeshift office, surrounded by files and computer equipment. The reunion between sisters was a tangle of tears and desperate embraces, momentarily forgetting the danger still looming. "Alara?" Sophia pulled back, her expression shifting from joy to shock as she registered Dominic's presence. "What are you doing with him? Do you know who he is?" "It's complicated," Alara started, eyes darting to the extensive documentation covering every surface. Files, photographs, and hard drives contained what appeared to be years of investigation into corruption at every level of Chicago's power structure. Before she could explain further, alerts flashed on Dominic's phone. Security systems detecting multiple approaching vehicles. "Leonie's backup," he growled. "They're early." They quickly barricaded the farmhouse, securing entries and establishing defensive positions. Dominic called for reinforcements, while Alara and Sophia gathered the most crucial evidence. The first shots shattered windows and splintered wood, forcing them to take cover. Alara moved instinctively to shield her sister as bullets tore through the wall above them. Sharp pain exploded in her shoulder, a clean hit, but the blood loss would be problematic. Dominic's expression turned glacial at the sight of her injury. The violence that followed was methodical and terrifying. Dominic eliminated threats with cold efficiency until a flanking attacker managed to breach their position, grabbing Sophia. Without hesitation, Dominic stepped into the line of fire, taking a bullet meant for her. The next few hours passed in a blur of medical personnel and secure transport to a private Russo facility. Alara refused treatment until she was certain both Sophia and Dominic would survive, finally allowing herself to be bandaged once they were stabilized. She maintained her vigil at Dominic's bedside, watching the steady rise and fall of his chest. When his eyes finally opened, his first raspy words surprised her. "Sophia, she's safe?" "Yes," Alara said softly, something shifting in her chest at his priorities. She moved to perch carefully on the edge of his bed, taking his hand in hers. The gesture felt as natural as breathing. "You nearly died protecting my sister, a woman you've never met who was investigating your family." Dominic's fingers tightened around hers. "She's your family, and somehow, against all odds and common sense, you've become mine." The late afternoon sun filtered through bulletproof windows as Alara entered the master suite, fresh bandages in hand. Dominic sat propped against the headboard, surrounded by tablets displaying security footage from multiple angles. His wounded shoulder was healing well, though he refused to show any sign of discomfort. "You're supposed to be resting," Alara chided, setting down the medical supplies. "Crime families don't take sick days." His voice was gruff but held an undertone of warmth reserved only for her. As she changed his bandages with practiced efficiency, Sophia entered with another stack of files. Over the past 3 days, they'd been systematically reviewing her evidence cache, a devastating collection of corruption reaching into every corner of Chicago's power structure. "The scope is wider than I initially realized," Sophia explained, spreading photographs across the bed. Judge Matthews taking bribes to dismiss cases, Police Commissioner Roberts coordinating drug shipments, Mayor Wilson's brother arranging construction contracts for kickbacks. Dominic studied the evidence with calculating eyes. The Calabrese family's fingerprints are all over this. Victor's been playing both sides for years. "That's what surprised me during my investigation," Sophia admitted reluctantly. The Russo operations, while illegal, had clear boundaries. No bribes to school boards, hospital administrators, social services. "Some things should remain untouched by our world," Dominic stated simply. His phone buzzed, a message from Victor Calabrese requesting an all-families meeting to address recent unfortunate events and the status of their bet. Dominic's expression hardened. "You're not fully recovered," Alara protested. "Showing weakness isn't an option. They need to see I'm still in control." While Dominic made calls to arrange security, Sophia pulled Alara aside into the adjoining sitting room. "We need to talk about what happens next." "What do you mean?" "I see how you look at him, Elle. How he looks at you. It's more than just an arrangement now, isn't it?" Alara sank into a leather armchair, suddenly exhausted. "It's complicated. He's still a crime boss. His methods kept us both alive," Alara interrupted. "Yes, he's violent when necessary, but he's also protected us, respected my boundaries, arranged security for you without demanding anything in return." Sophia studied her sister carefully. "Do you love him?" The question hung heavy in the air. Alara's silence was answer enough. "Can you really build a future with someone like him, once this crisis passes?" "I don't know," Alara admitted. "Nothing about this situation is normal." Later that evening, Alara stood on the balcony watching the sunset paint the estate grounds in shades of gold. Security teams patrolled the perimeter, while gardeners tended the immaculate landscaping, the strange juxtaposition of beauty and danger that defined her new life. She sensed Dominic's presence before he spoke. "Penny, for your thoughts? After we handle the families, after we use Sophia's evidence to ensure our safety, what happens to us?" She turned to face him. Was this marriage ever meant to be more than a bet or an alliance? Instead of answering, he handed her a thick envelope. Her heart stuttered until she saw they weren't divorce papers, but federal immunity agreements, ironclad protection for both sisters, regardless of future circumstances. "I want you to choose to stay," he said quietly. "Not because you need my protection, but because you want what I want, a life together, however complicated that might be." He left her with the papers and the weight of possibility, his willingness to give her true freedom, speaking louder than any declaration of love. The private dining room at La Maison d'Or radiated old-world elegance, crystal chandeliers casting warm light over the assembled crime families of Chicago. Dominic entered with measured confidence, his hand resting possessively on Alara's lower back. Her emerald silk gown concealed both a weapon and her healing wound, while his impeccable black suit showed no hint of his injured shoulder. Victor Calabrese sat at the head of the mahogany table, his arm suspended in a sling. Representatives from the decimated Navarro family huddled together, their diminished status evident in their defensive postures. The neutral families, the Romeros, Castellanos, and Bianchis, watched with barely concealed interest as the power dynamics shifted before them. "Let's address the elephant in the room," Victor announced, nodding to his assistant who distributed manila envelopes. "The terms of our bet were clear: transform a beggar into the perfect mafia wife without emotional attachment. These surveillance photos prove otherwise." The images showed intimate moments at the lake house, Dominic tenderly treating Ilara's wounds, their passionate embrace on the balcony, the way they unconsciously gravitated toward each other even in crowds. Dominic's response surprised everyone. "You're right." A ripple of murmurs circulated the room. "What began as a bet evolved into something genuine. But while I was falling in love with my wife," he emphasized the word, making it clear this wasn't a temporary arrangement. "You were conspiring with a corrupt FBI agent to eliminate me regardless of the bet's outcome." He gestured to his consigliere, who distributed their own folders, containing carefully selected pieces of Sophia's evidence. The documents revealed Victor's extensive collaboration with Reynolds, including plans to frame Dominic for federal crimes once his territory was weakened. "This is lies," Victor sputtered, but his face had gone pale. Ilara rose gracefully, commanding attention without demanding it. "If I may suggest a solution that benefits everyone in this room, except those who've proven themselves untrustworthy." The other families leaned forward, intrigued, by this woman who carried herself with such quiet authority. She outlined a territorial restructuring that would stabilize the power vacuum created by recent events. The Navarro holdings would be administered by a council of neutral families, preventing any single organization from becoming too powerful. Victor's territory would be divided among those who remained loyal during the recent conflict, with provisions for peaceful resolution of future disputes. "My wife," Dominic said with unmistakable pride, "understands that stability benefits everyone more than constant power grabs and betrayal." The Romero patriarch nodded approvingly. "She thinks like a true Donna, protecting family interests while maintaining peace." "This is outrageous," Victor protested, but the other families were already signaling their agreement with Ilara's proposal. "The bet is irrelevant," the Castellano boss declared. "Dominic Russo's wife has proven herself more valuable than any traditional arrangement could have provided." The meeting concluded with Victor effectively stripped of power, the Navarro family chastened, and Dominic's position stronger than ever. As they prepared to leave, Ilara's hand slipped into his with natural intimacy. His phone buzzed. A text from his security chief made his expression darken. "Antonio's escaped, killed 2 guards." Ilara's posture shifted subtly, the softness of the diplomatic wife replaced by the military precision of a hunter. "We find him. Together." That single word, "we," carried the weight of her choice, her commitment to their partnership in all its complexity. The dining room glowed with warmth as candles flickered across the elegantly set table. Ilara watched Dominic at the head. His usual intimidating presence softened as he engaged Maya in a discussion about expanding her security consulting business. Sophia sat beside Ilara, her initial wariness of Dominic gradually giving way to cautious acceptance. "The Thompson contract came through," Maya reported, her confidence restored after her ordeal. "Your introduction helped secure 3 more corporate clients," Dominic nodded, pleased. "Good. Legitimate business connections are crucial for the transition we're planning." Ilara reached for her wine glass, the diamond on her finger catching the light. The ring was no longer just a prop for their arrangement, but a symbol of their genuine commitment. "Speaking of transitions, Sophia, how's the new investigative journalism foundation coming along?" Sophia's eyes lit up. The anonymous funding source was very generous. She glanced meaningfully at Dominic. "We're already investigating corruption in 3 major cities. Just be careful how you use certain evidence," Dominic cautioned. "Balance is delicate right now." The conversation flowed easily between business and personal matters. Ilara had begun overseeing security protocols for Dominic's legitimate ventures, applying her military intelligence background to protect their evolving empire. The domestic scene felt almost normal, despite the armed guards patrolling the grounds. A subtle vibration from Dominic's phone shattered the illusion of peace. His expression hardened as he read the message, immediately shifting from relaxed host to alert predator. "Antonio's been spotted at the perimeter." Tension instantly filled the room. Ilara's hand moved instinctively toward her concealed weapon. "He's requesting a meeting," Dominic continued, his voice cold. "Claims to have critical information. It's a trap," Maya stated flatly. Probably, Alara agreed. But if he wanted to attack, why announce himself? Security footage appeared on Dominic's tablet, showing Antonio standing alone at the gate, hands raised to show he was unarmed. They debated the risks, finally deciding to hear him out in the secure room beneath the house. Marco, Dominic called to his security chief. Move Miss Kane and Miss Kane. Chen to Safe House 3, full protection detail. Once. Sophia and Maya were safely away. Dominic and Alara descended to the reinforced basement chamber. Antonio sat handcuffed to a steel chair, looking haggard but alert. Your father orchestrated my escape, he announced without preamble. Dominic went perfectly still. Alara watched the muscle in his jaw tighten, the only visible sign of his shock. He's been monitoring everything from exile, Antonio continued. He disapproves of your changes to the organization, your marriage. He glanced at Alara. He sees it all as weakness. Why come back now? Alara demanded. He's planning to reclaim control, starting by eliminating problems like your sister and her evidence. Antonio leaned forward. He ordered me to target you next, Mrs. Russo. That's when I knew I had to choose sides. Hours later, after securing Antonio with triple security at a different location, Dominic stood motionless by their bedroom window. The moonlight cast shadows across his face as he stared into the darkness, processing the imminent threat of his father's return. Alara approached silently, wrapping her arms around him from behind. She felt the tension in his muscles, the weight of his past pressing down on him. If he's coming for us, he'll discover what everyone else has learned, she said softly but firmly. The Russos aren't what they were. We're something new. Dominic turned in her embrace. The vulnerability in his eyes shifted to resolve as her words reached him, reminding him of the strength they'd found together. Dominic's reflection fractured across the glass as he stared at Chicago's glittering skyline, his shoulders rigid with tension. Behind him, the quiet tapping of keyboards filled his office as Alara and Sophia coordinated their defensive strategy against Giuseppe's return. Another federal warrant just went through, Sophia announced, her fingers flying across her laptop. That's 3 of his closest political allies under investigation. Good, Dominic replied without turning. Keep the pressure on. Don't let them catch their breath. Alara glanced up from her own screen, studying her husband's silhouette. In the 2 weeks since learning of Giuseppe's return, Dominic had worked tirelessly to fortify their position. His father's old loyalists might have welcomed him back to Chicago, but they'd find a very different power structure awaiting them. Maya's team finished upgrading security at the last warehouse, Alara reported. All properties are now running enhanced protocols. And our captains? Dominic finally turned from the window. Solid, Alara assured him. Your father's attempts to contact them directly have been shut down. They understand loyalty goes both ways under your leadership. A message alert chimed on Dominic's phone. His expression hardened as he read it. He wants to meet. Alone. Absolutely not, Alara said immediately, rising from her chair. It's not a request I can refuse without appearing weak. Then we plan it carefully, Sophia interjected. Neutral territory, multiple escape routes, our people in position. They spent hours coordinating security details for the meeting. When Dominic finally faced his father in an empty restaurant's private room, Giuseppe Russo looked older than his years, but no less dangerous. You've done well, Giuseppe opened, studying his son. Better than I expected. Why are you really here? Dominic demanded. To test you, to ensure the family's future. Giuseppe's smile held no warmth. You've transformed our operations while maintaining our power. Impressive. And my mother? Was killing her part of your grand plan for our future? Giuseppe's expression remained neutral as he slid a flash drive across the table. The truth is more complicated than you know. See for yourself. Later that night, Dominic and Alara sat in their secure room, documents from the drive scattered across multiple screens. The evidence was damning. Reports, recordings, federal agreements, all pointing to his mother's cooperation with authorities. She was willing to sacrifice everything, Dominic said quietly, including my future. Alara moved behind his chair, placing her hands on his shoulders. She made her choices, just like you've made yours. Different choices, he agreed, covering one of her hands with his own, building something new instead of destroying what exists. Your father built his power on fear, Alara reminded him softly, but you have the chance to build something different, something stronger. Dominic turned in his chair to face her, vulnerability raw in his expression. I never expected you to become my strength rather than my weakness. Moonlight spilled across the manicured lawns of the Russo estate as Chicago's most powerful figures mingled beneath crystal chandeliers. 6 months had transformed more than just Dominic and Alara's relationship. It had reshaped the city's entire power structure. Alara moved through the crowd with practiced elegance, her designer gown concealing the weapon holstered against her thigh. She caught Dominic's eye across the room as he concluded a conversation with a legitimate business partner, his subtle nod conveying volumes between them. Quite a transformation. Victor Calabrese observed from his position near the bar, his diminished status evident in how others now avoided his orbit, though not the one we originally wagered on. The best investments often yield unexpected returns, Alara replied smoothly, noting how his forced smile tightened. Behind him, she spotted Sophia deep in conversation with a group of journalists who followed her new investigative platform's exposés with religious devotion. Giuseppe Russo made his entrance precisely on schedule, commanding attention despite his brief appearance. He exchanged a measured look with Dominic respect, replacing their former antagonism before departing for his flight to Italy. His exit marked a symbolic transition, the old guard, giving way to the new. At the center of the ballroom, Dominic raised his glass for a toast. 6 months ago, I made a bet born of pride and arrogance, he announced, his voice carrying authority without menace. I wagered I could transform a stranger into the perfect Mafia wife. Instead, she transformed me, and through that transformation, strengthened our entire organization. Murmurs rippled through the crowd as Alara joined him. Their public displays of affection were rare but strategic, each one carefully crafted to reinforce their unity without diminishing their authority. Our charitable foundation's newest initiative will provide education and opportunities for youth at risk of gang recruitment, Alara added, her military background lending weight to her words. Breaking cycles of violence serves everyone's interests. Later, as the crowd thinned to their inner circle, the atmosphere shifted from formal to familial. Maya lounged comfortably on a terrace sofa, discussing security protocols with Valentina, who had become fiercely protective of her sister-in-law. Around them, trusted captains shared drinks and genuine laughter. We have an announcement, Dominic said, drawing their attention. The adoption paperwork is nearly complete. By next month, we'll be welcoming Thomas home. Sophia beamed at her sister. They'd all met the 8-year-old boy, orphaned by recent gang violence, during Alara's visits to their foundation's youth center. His resilience had touched something in both Dominic and Alara. He'll have quite the extended family, Maya observed, raising her glass. As the intimate gathering concluded, Dominic led Alara through moonlit gardens to a secluded alcove. Candles illuminated a small altar, where their private vow renewal would strip away all pretense of their original ceremony. This time by choice, Dominic murmured, taking her hands in his. Their promises were simple but profound, acknowledging their complex beginning while embracing their chosen future. Distant music drifted from the remaining celebration as they swayed together, the garden's privacy allowing rare vulnerability. The bet was the best mistake I ever made, Dominic admitted, his usual armor completely lowered. Alara smiled against his chest. I came to destroy your world, but found my place in it instead. Under the stars, Dominic's whisper held none of his former possessive edge, only devotion. You're mine forever, as I am completely yours. Their kiss sealed a union that had begun in darkness but now illuminated them both, transforming not just their lives, but the very nature of power in their world.